Welcome to the Environmental Justice Leaders Program Limited Series podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mayra Sanchez from the UC Davis Feminist Research Institute. This is a three-part series where you will get to hear from the 6 2024 environmental justice leaders working with the UC Davis researchers. The leaders are all based in California and have extensive backgrounds as frontline organizers and advocates. Together, we will learn about the transportation and energy justice issues these leaders are tackling in communities across the state of California. For the last 150 years, we've relied on fossil fuels to power our dominant ways of living, which many scientists link to global climate change. The impacts of this extractive fossil fuel economy disproportionately impact low-income and BIPOC community members across the nation and the state of California and communities in the global south who use significantly less fossil fuels. As we transition towards clean energy and more sustainable sources, significant disparities in energy use, access, benefit, and harm stand to be replicated. What does an equitable, just transition to clean energy mean for environmental justice communities here and abroad? What is the real cost of energy? Who's paying for it? Who has disproportionately suffered the harmful health and environmental effects caused by energy production? Who has used, accessed, or benefited the least from energy production? Today, we're joined by Natalie Espinoza and Andres Ramirez, who both work towards energy equity. Natalie Espinoza leads community outreach and engagement initiatives for the Energy Coalition, TEC, and facilitates their Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. With over a decade of experience in energy efficiency program education and engagement, part of Natalie's role at TEC is leading community engagement with community-based organizations, fostering partnerships that drive impactful, localized solutions. Natalie holds a degree in environmental science and policy from California State University, Long Beach, with minors in geography and anthropology. These studies shaped her understanding of how people move, think, and prosper. She applies this knowledge to her work, aiming to highlight the interconnectedness of people and their environments. Andres Ramirez is the Executive Director of People for Mobility Justice. Andres is a strategist, case-maker, organizer, and urbanist that specializes on innovative strategies to transform low-income communities into thriving, healthy, self-sustainable hubs. As a native Angelino, he has dedicated his life to building community power in South and Southeast LA. He is part of an emerging active transportation movement in Southeast LA that is challenging the city and county to transform its car-centric culture into one that supports multiple modes, especially walking and cycling. Both of them are based in the greater Los Angeles area. So how are you both doing today?
Very good. Very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Well, first, can you each please tell us what energy disparities mean to you and the work that you do? Andres, let's start with you.
A lot of it has to do with questioning how energy is generated, who is using the energy the most, and how that impacts EJ communities, right? I think in LA specifically, right, there's a long history of environmental racism and redlining that align, right? And it's not a coincidence that a lot of the gas plants, the oil refineries are found in BIPOC communities. And so I think it's important to have a conversation about, one, what's been the impact of fossil fuel usage on these communities, a health impact specifically, right? But also a real conversation of, who's using this energy in what ways, right? Because a lot of the people in our communities, due to economic factors like poverty, right, are energy efficient naturally, right? They're not wasteful with their energy, right? They're super efficient. Folks are opening windows. They don't have AC units. They're conscious about lights being on or leaving appliances on. We're talking about the livelihood of people, right? The right to breathe clean air, the right to not have chronic illnesses, right? That's impacted by the air they're breathing, right? That's impacted by what are the sources for the energy that's being used in the greater Los Angeles area, right?
I just would want to build on what you've already mentioned, Andres, and just talking about that this energy disparities lead to disadvantaged low-income communities having to make decisions that they wouldn't have to if there weren't these built-in already systems to have their homes be the ones that are constantly the ones dealing with the public service power shutoffs and PSPS events when there are the high heat days. And something especially specific to California is that a lot of other states, especially on the East Coast, are more focused on heating. That's a much bigger issue for them. But we have to deal with heat and extreme heat on a much more regular basis than at least in Southern California, than other folks realize. And so with that, the energy disparities lead to what you mentioned, health problems and people getting really, really sick. And no one well, there's not enough focus, I think, on how much our energy system is leading to those health issues for folks. So it means that those that are already, it's very expensive to be poor, basically. So folks that are already spending so much money just to keep their houses, up and running, are then also going to have to take on the burden of whatever health effects they're also going to have to deal with in the long run too. So, yeah, that's where I want to. Energy disparities means connecting everything.
Thank you. Andres, you mentioned that what you really wanted to focus on was on how energy is being produced and who is using the energy and how that impacts environmental justice communities. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the utilities in SoCal, they're not transparent to communities in terms of how they're generating their power, right? Like they like to expound on how there's solar farms that are in the desert that supposedly bring in a bunch of energy, which is cool, but it doesn't cover the need of the region, which is ginormous, right? What they don't mention is they still running natural gas power plants, right? They're dependent on like having diesel backup generators that they've been used on the extreme heat. Is not a regular usage because diesel is very toxic, right? It has very harmful impacts in terms of emissions to its communities. But like Natalie's mentioning, like the extreme heat events are becoming normalized in Southern California. It's happening every year. My question is like, how are we pushing this needle on the state's commitment to move away from fossil fuel usage? To me, then that opens the door of accountability, right? Like,
And to build off of that as well is the idea that the energy companies are putting it on the consumer.
Right.
When it should be on them to be thinking about where they're sourcing our energy as much. And then it also brings into question of why are you allowed to be more comfortable if you have more money? Why are lower income folks not allowed to be comfortable in their own homes?
It is dangerous for the most vulnerable communities,
Absolutely.
right? Like the elders, the folks that have disabilities, like they don't have choices. They have to sit there with fans, blow hot air themselves,
Exactly. Yeah.
And like it has led to deaths. I think the way things work, folks are just, living check to check, right? They're just covering the cost, whatever the cost is, and moving on to the next month and worrying about how to survive that, right? It doesn't allow for space to really think about like, wait a minute, why is my bill going up so much all of a sudden, right? Like, what do you mean?
Not using any more energy.
Right.
Where did this come from?
Yeah.
Right. What do you mean they're charging extra during peak hours? Like those decisions are being made at meetings that occur during business hours in Sacramento, and people can engage that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's built in a way that excludes people that are impacted.
So I think that several things are coming up, and one is, of course, the development of infrastructure of energy, how it's produced, where it's sourced from, what are the implications, the environmental implications, but also it's how it's being consumed and that it's not being consumed equally. What do you have to say about those also cultural patterns regarding our how we feel about our use of the environment, essentially, and our ability to modify it and control it?
the city of Phoenix itself is like a testament to man's arrogance, like insisting that we will make this desert work for us. And that comes from, because we're going to blast the AC, we're going to turn this infrastructure on. And at least in Southern California, homes were built to match the people showing up and not necessarily built with the intentionality of, if we move this house in this way, we're going to have the airflow naturally, and this will lead to us being cooler in our homes and not having to run AC as much or anything along those lines. And so that's another thing that I think that is all leading down to is capitalism, and that we are building our things here to make somebody the biggest buck.
It's crazy. That makes me think of an article I just read the other day that Microsoft just purchased a nuclear power plant because they need that much energy to run their AI systems. And that's becoming a thing, right? Like private companies are investing in their own source of energy production, right? To cover their needs. Companies or entities like that are prioritized over the livelihood of people, right? And there's almost an arrogance to it, right? Because it's just like, because we can, right? These are power plants that were shut down because, danger stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But, here they are being turned back on because, they're willing to pay whatever $1 billion to do it.
Well, speaking about the biggest buck, clean energy is often touted as a solution for climate change, an integral to our limitless capitalist growth, but many ask us to stay attentive to how it maintains business as usual, rather than transform our systems or economies. Who is left behind in the mainstream push for clean energy?
I mean, I would say it's always the poor people, right? Like, new technologies are made inaccessible by cost, right? It's never cheap to use new technologies. And so these, and when I mean poor people is BIPOC communities, EJ communities, whatever you want to call it, right? Like,
I also think about the fact that once those technologies become affordable, there's no longer incentives. So people thinking about just the solar industry in California, how expensive it was, they provided all the incentives. A lot of folks started to buy it. Solar panels started to go down. And what happened in the last year? There's no incentive anymore for solar panels. Now to actually get a good benefit from having a solar panel in your home, you need a battery. So you finally saved up your money for your solar panels, and now they're telling you, actually, you need this additional technology, which is also thinking about sourcing. Where did they get all of the materials to make those solar panels, to make those battery storage? And so I think I want to go back to what you mentioned at the very beginning of your question of, why are we not questioning then our processes and what we're doing business as usual to change it so we're not so energy intensive anymore? That as we move forward, everything needs to be plugged in. At what point do we say enough is enough? We really, really have to change the way we all behave and we all are moving through the world because we're just using too much energy.
Yeah.
Nope.
Thank you. Natalie, this question's for you, but either of you can answer.
Yeah.
Private investor-owned utility companies are largely beholden to shareholders and driven by capitalist principles of growth and profit above all else. What are the consequences of the current model? What opportunities might exist outside of this model for equitable, sustainable energy provisioning and production? And this is sort of things that you were touching on in our previous conversations.
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of said it, right? Where those companies are being held to, continuing to have a profit, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where things like the incentive models, they get so scrutinized at the state level of how many savings are we getting from doing this thing? Who is that benefiting in the long run too? And so when we look at the model of energy as a business and not energy as a human right at this point, then you're never going to have people catching up to what they need to be, where they need to be so that they're not bending over backwards just to keep the lights on. One of the other consequences is that the state of California has a lot of lofty goals, right? The rest of the world is always looking at California as leading the way with energy efficiency, with climate change, with all these great policies, but we're still being held to capitalistic standards of how we build these programs.
Because they're private businesses, that allows them also, allows them to really focus on advocating for their vested interest, right? So they're the biggest lobbyists when here in Sacramento with the Public Utilities Commission and the Energy Commission. It creates an imbalance, right? Because there's no one there representing the ratepayers. Also, the question of accountability, right? Like, when it comes to stuff like utility lines causing wildfires, right? And that company's still up and running and has a monopoly. I'd be more interested in seeing more public utilities. Like in LA, we have the unique experience that we have with LNWP. There's more grounds for accountability there, I feel like. Energy should be a human right, it shouldn't be a commodity. We talk about the crisis around housing, right? Like that some folks are like, one hard debt from the utilities away from, I can't afford my rent no more, right? And I'm living in my car or whatever, right? Like that's that real conversation that needs to be had.
So we've heard a lot about energy production, clean energy, and energy is also important for transportation, right? Andres, could you tell us a little bit more about your work with mobility justice and what you're doing to counter this need for more energy?
There's an intersection between environmental justice, transportation, housing, and health. And that's why we talked about who's using the energy the most, right? Like people in BIPOC communities, for the most part, are pedestrians, are using cycling as a form of transportation as opposed to recreation, right? Using public transportation, right? Because these modes of transportation do have an impact in terms of air quality, fossil fuel usage as well, right? And so, part of the advocacy is making sure, as the state is mandating electrification of transportation, that there's options available to our communities that work for our communities, right? Because for the most part, a lot of the advocacy for electrification has been focused on motor vehicles, right? Like electrify your car, incentives to electrify your car, if you're charging at your home or whatever. But that's not an option for a lot of folks that we work with, right? Because a lot of folks are renters. A lot of folks are renting like the garage, so you can't use the garage to charge, One of the things that we're piloting is the notion of introducing electric bikes as a mode of transportation for folks, at least for local trips. Things like bike share, a lot of times are a barrier to folks because they require things like a credit card or require you to have an online profile or stuff like that, right? And there's a real digital divide in our community. Electrification of bus fleets. If you have public transit, that's not 50 cars that need to be charging at the same time, right? Ultimately, we feel that less cars on the road lead to safety for folks. Dependence on like using cars, trucks, and whatever has impacted our health as well, right? And it's something that I think we need to really start rethinking as the world is evolving in terms of how clean energy technology is being engaged with in ways that are practical for people in our neighborhoods, right? For ways that's accessible and affordable for them.
It's also about challenging the individualistic narrative of living in the United States and being a person, of being an American, and bringing together community again. Because a lot of those modes of transportation requires us to care about our neighbor.
That's really important, how we think about solutions in a more thinking about sort of the common good. For the past 6 months, you have been working with researchers at UC Davis. Can you tell us more about these collaborations? Natalie, you've been working with the Market Transformation Center.
Yeah, it's been really great. We've been spending a lot of time almost like consulting each other just on what it really means to engage meaningfully with the community when doing different projects. So I really appreciate being able to work with a researcher that is very interested in making sure that her participants are treated fairly and that they're getting a good experience from their work. And then that translates to me and the projects that I implement. I want to make sure that any participant in our projects, they're getting more good out of it than we even are.
Yeah, I'm also working with UC Davis on research around hydrogen in specific. I think the research team has really been open to my questions around like production, around positive or negative impacts of at scale production of hydrogen, right? Of green hydrogen. And then what's the economic impact, right? What are the kind of jobs needed to do this? We're working on a policy brief to kind of answer some of these questions that hopefully, provide some guidance.
Great. To close, what would you like our listeners to know or do?
What got me interested in working in this field anyway was to be able to help with folks with those questions and making sure that we're providing things to them that they actually want. And especially in working in environmental justice, disadvantaged communities. And then also just don't get discouraged. I think that was one of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking about that there's not one answer, one thing, one big solution that's going to help us through all of this. And so that doesn't mean we get discouraged. That means that we know that we have to put effort and do a lot of different things at once and work in parallel with each other.
Be informed.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to hold decision makers accountable. These decisions are going to impact not only your lives, but the lives of those that come after you, right?
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to have you both and learn more about the projects that you're doing and more about these important issues about energy equity.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the stage.
Thank you. The Environmental Justice Leaders Program is a collaboration between the Feminist Research Institute and the Institute of Transportation Studies. If you'd like to learn more about the program and our work, be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website at free.ucdavis.edu and its.ucdavis.edu. Special thanks to our researcher and writer, Megan Williams, to Michael Fortunato and Samuel A. Chiu for the production and technical assistance, and to the environmental justice leaders for taking part in this series. Thank you.